What if I told you that beneath the soil of Georgia, chains still whisper, that the ground itself remembers, not with silence, but with the metallic drag of suffering no man alive today can truly understand? This is not a story of ghosts told for children. This is a wound, rotting, festering, hidden beneath collapsing timber and suffocating vines. You were never meant to hear what I'm about to tell you. And yet, you are here, standing before the locked cellar door of a past that has been sealed, not out of reverence, but out of fear. There is a stretch of road in rural Georgia where the air seems too heavy, as if weighed down by secrets. Travelers say the trees bend inward unnaturally, their limbs contorted like skeletal arms, forming an archway that feels less like shelter and more like a trap. Beneath that arch, hidden just beyond a crooked fork in the path, lies what remains of the Lockridge Plantation. From a distance, it appears harmless, a rotting house strangled by kudzu, its windows darkened by decades of dust. But those who've stood close enough to its walls report something else, a vibration, faint but undeniable, humming low like iron chains dragged across stone. The story begins in the early 1800s with Elias Lockridge, a man whose name never sat proudly in the registers of Southern gentry. He was not admired, nor envied, nor even respected. He was whispered about. Unlike the grand planters who grew crops and hosted balls, Lockridge trafficked in what cannot be redeemed, the buying and breaking of human lives. His plantation was not known for cotton or tobacco, but for the cruel commerce of bodies. He kept no careful books for crops, only for chains. But his true darkness was hidden, not in the fields, but beneath his house. Behind the cellar wall was a passage leading down into Georgia clay where no light entered, no air seemed to move. It was not a cellar. As it was not a prison, it was a tomb in waiting, and there in 1863, as Union forces swept closer and the promise of emancipation spread like wildfire, Lockridge abandoned his home, but he did not release his slaves. He left 16 men and women in shackles, chained to the stone, sealed in darkness. The locals say their screams echoed in that chamber until their throats bled raw. And then, silence. When the war ended, the South wore its scars openly, but the Lockridge estate was different. It did not burn like other plantations. It did not vanish under the sweep of new landowners. It simply sank into itself, swallowed by weeds and rot. For decades, no one dared touch it, because those who knew the truth whispered one thing: the land had claimed its debt, and it would not release what it held. It was not until 1891, nearly 30 years after the final cries had been smothered by clay and hunger, that descendants of the Lockridge family attempted to reclaim the property. They came with surveyors and county men, intent on dividing the land for inheritance. But when the cellar wall was broken through, what they found was not simply tragic, it was unholy. The chamber was still intact. 17 iron rings bolted into the earth. The stench of death should have long been carried away by time, but the air that escaped was thick, sour, and damp, as if it had been waiting. Bones still clung to chains, rusted metal fused into the very marrow. But here was the detail no one could explain. The chains gleamed. They were clean, as if polished by unseen hands, untouched by rust, untouched by insects, untouched even by the teeth of rats. The soil beneath the corpses was not brown, it was black, scorched as if by fire, though no flame had ever burned there. The county sheriff filed a single report, which later disappeared from the archives. No photographs remain. The family sealed the chamber again, abandoning the estate for Savannah. To neighbors, they offered only one explanation: cursed ground. And cursed it was, for soon after, tales began to crawl from the woods surrounding the plantation. Children woke from dreams of rattling chains. Hunters claimed they saw pale figures moving between the trees. Livestock refused to graze near the fields, and on still nights, locals swore they could hear the faint clinking of iron echoing from beneath the soil. Understand this: the Lockridge Plantation was not just another ruin. It became a wound in the landscape, one the earth itself could not close. The people buried there were denied dignity in life and denied release in death. And the chains, polished by nothing mortal, remained, waiting, watching. Even now, travelers say the silence around the estate feels wrong, as though the air itself listens, recording every heartbeat, every whisper, every step, because what dies in chains does not die alone. In 1947, the story resurfaced, not through whispers in the woods, but through ink and paper, brittle and rotting with age. A historian named Edgar Mallory, sifting through forgotten estate relics in Savannah, came across a family Bible. Pressed between its pages was something no holy book should ever cradle, a small, leather-bound ledger. Its spine cracked, its pages brittle, but its words still alive. It had belonged to Samuel Dress, the overseer of Lockridge Plantation. Samuel Dress was not a master. He was an instrument. Elias Lockridge's iron hand, the one who enforced silence and obedience. His writing in that ledger was mechanical, detached, devoid of empathy. He did not record people, only units. Each entry was a cold recital, punishment delivered, hours confined, food withheld. His handwriting bled no hesitation, no remorse. But as the years turned to 1862, something in the ink began to change. He began writing about the dissenters, 17 men and women kept apart from the rest. He labeled their chamber lower containment, the same chamber discovered decades later. His notes shifted from control to obsession. Silence ordered, no acknowledgement permitted, light denied, sleep denied. And then, the fractures. His perfect handwriting began to shake. Dates skipped, words scratched with uneven force. His entries grew restless. He described noises, whispers in the clay, chains rattling though none moved. And then one entry, underlined, nearly torn into the page. They no longer speak to me, but I hear them still. In the walls, in the stone, watching. On September 12, 1862, Dress wrote a final clear passage. They do not sleep. They will not forget me. They are awake. The words that followed dissolved into a scrawl, unreadable madness, as though written by a hand not entirely his own. His ledger ends there, no record of his death, no record of his bury. Always Samuel Dress vanished into the silence he once commanded, and yet the ledger remained, carried, hidden, waiting. When Mallory questioned a surviving descendant of the Lockridge family, her face drained pale. She would speak no more, save one chilling warning. If you found the ledger, you've already heard them too. Tell me, have you felt it yet? The weight pressing on your chest, the faint sound in your ears, as if chains dragged across stone. That is how it begins. By the 1970s, the Lockridge estate was no longer spoken of in polite conversation. It had become a rumor, a drunken whisper passed in bars, a tale meant to scare children into silence. Maps no longer marked the land. The woods had claimed the house, twisting vines strangling its bones, while the fields stood barren, avoided even by birds. But folklore has a way of seducing the curious, and in the summer of 1973, curiosity came in the form of 6 university students from Atlanta. They were young, arrogant, filled with the stubborn hunger of academia. Led by Charles Wexley, an archaeology student obsessed with forgotten Civil War sites, they set out to document the plantation. They brought notebooks, cameras, tape recorders, tools of the living, fragile shields against the dead. Their professors laughed at the warnings given by locals. Old stories, they said, just Southern superstition. But the woods do not forget. On their first night, the students camped near the ruins of the main house. The air was too still, too heavy. In his notes, Wexley later wrote, "The silence was not natural. It was watching us." That night, one of the girls, Linda Carr, woke trembling. She swore she heard humming beneath her tent, a lullaby, low and broken, rising up through the ground itself. The others dismissed it. But the next night, none of them slept. The tape recorders they left running outside the collapsed cellar captured something impossible to deny: the dragging of iron across stone, the faint echo of voices chanting in a tongue no one recognized, and through it all, the sharp, metallic clink of chains. On the third day, the students broke through the cellar wall. Their lamps cut into the darkness of the chamber, revealing what had been described before but never believed. The rings, 17 of them, bolted into clay. The stains on the earth, black as if burned. But this time, Tiinon, here was something more. Symbols etched into the stone, crude yet deliberate, carved in circles and spirals. Sarah Elkins, one of the group, whispered that the marks were not random. They were ritual, something meant to bind or to contain. And in that moment, the students realized the stories were not just history, they were prophecy, still unfolding, still alive. Inside that chamber, the air was suffocating, thick as if it had weight. Dust swirled but would not settle, and the glow of the lanterns seemed to bend, dimmed by some unseen hand. The students stood silent, each of them drawn toward the symbols carved into the clay walls. They were crude, but arranged with unsettling precision. Circles intersecting, spirals that seemed to draw the eye inward until dizziness set in. Sarah Elkins traced one with her fingertips before anyone could stop her. Her skin came away black, not with dirt, but with a residue that clung tar-like to her flesh. She swore it was warm. She swore it pulsed. Wexley's journal recorded what followed. The air changed. The silence became alive, as though each breath belonged not to us, but to something listening. Then came the sound. Not loud, not violent, but soft. A slow, rhythmic clinking, as though iron was shifting just beyond the walls. The group fled back to the surface, laughing nervously, pretending it was the creak of settling stone. But laughter is a fragile shield, and it did not last. That night, they made camp further from the cellar. Wexley ordered the group to stay together, to sleep close. But Linda Carr vanished before dawn. No sound, no struggle, no trace of movement. Her tent unzipped neatly, as if she had risen calmly in the night and walked into the woods. They searched for hours, no footprints, no broken branches. The ground bore no evidence that she had ever existed. When they replayed the tapes recorded during the night, their blood turned cold. Linda's voice could be heard, faint but clear, singing the same lullaby she had once claimed to hear beneath her tent. Only now, she was not alone. 17 other voices hummed in unison with her, low and endless, bound together in chains of sound. The group panicked. They debated leaving, but Wexley insisted on one more day, despair, to prove that their research had meaning. He argued that Linda had fled, that fear had driven her into hiding, but his hands shook as he wrote, his pen carving harder into the page with every word. And when night came again, none of them closed their eyes. They understood now. The Lockridge plantation was not abandoned. It had never been abandoned. It was still waiting. And it was hungry. By the 6th night, terror had shredded reason. The remaining 5 students huddled together, lanterns burning low, as if light itself no longer belonged to them. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every whisper of wind carried the clink of unseen chains. Wexley's notes grew frantic, his once neat handwriting collapsing into jagged lines. The walls are breathing. They know us by name. Linda hums when no one speaks. It was Sarah who broke first. She swore she saw faces in the dark, gaunt, hollow, pressed against the thin air itself, as though reality were just glass between them. She clawed at her own arms, screaming that invisible shackles burned her wrists. When the others tried to hold her, she whispered something that froze their blood. 17, but there must be 18 now. That night, another was taken. Daniel Price, the quiet one, vanished while the group sat only feet away. One moment he was rocking on his heels, mumbling prayers into his chest. The next, silence. His lantern toppled to the ground, still warm. No sound, no struggle, just absence. When the group replayed the tapes again, their dread deepened. The lullaby was louder now, Linda's voice, joined by Daniel's, weaving into the chorus of 17. The rhythm was no longer soft. It was commanding, ritualistic, as though the very soil throbbed with it. Understand this. The Lockridge curse is not just memory. It recruits. Each soul claimed becomes another link in the chain, another voice in the choir of the damned. That is why the numbers change. 16, 17, 18, always growing, never shrinking. And now you listen. The story presses into your ears, and the chains creak beneath your own ribs. You may believe you are safe, sitting in the comfort of light, but the Lockridge dead thrive on recognition. They feed when their names are spoken, when their story is heard. That is how the curse spreads, through attention, through belief, through you. So if you wish to break free of their gaze, if you wish to anchor your spirit to the living, type this phrase in the comments, not once, but twice, to bind yourself to the light. The chains will not claim me. Write it now, before you feel the humming beneath your feet. By dawn, the survivors could no longer pretend they were researchers. They were prey. The chamber, the chains, the lullaby. These were not relics of history, but weapons sharpened by time, waiting for them. Wexley, pale and trembling, finally gave the order to leave. They packed in silence, each of them avoiding the other's eyes, as though fear itself might be contagious. But the woods had changed. The path they had followed in was gone, swallowed by brambles and twisted trunks that had not been there days before. The trees leaned in unnaturally, their branches clawing together like fingers interlocked in prayer. And beneath their feet, the earth pulsed. Not metaphor, not imagination. The ground throbbed like flesh, as if something beneath it was alive and breathing. They tried to follow the compass. North, always north. Yet no matter how far they walked, the air grew heavier, thicker, dragging at their lungs. The same landmarks repeated. A hollow oak split down the middle, a fallen pine shaped like a cross, a patch of earth blackened as if scorched. The forest was circling them, folding them into itself. On the second night of their escape attempt, they camped without fire. The air was too still, the silence too deep. That was when the chains began again, not beneath the soil this time, but all around them. From tree to tree, echoing softly, then louder, until it felt as though an army of phantoms dragged iron through the woods. One of the students, Robert Hale, cracked under the sound. He ran screaming into the dark, his lantern swinging wildly, vanishing between the trees, his cries cut off in a single choking gasp. The others never saw him again. By then, Sarah was muttering constantly, rocking back and forth, eyes wide as if she no longer saw the living. "They're not buried," she whispered. "They're standing all around us, watching, counting, and they are pati." And Wexley wrote his final entry that night. The ink smears across the page like blood. "We do not move forward. We do not move back. We are caught in the circle. The woods are the chains, and the chains are endless." What he did not write, what none of them dared admit aloud, was the truth pressing on their chests. The Lockridge dead had never been confined to the cellar. The whole plantation was their prison, and anyone who entered became part of it. The third night was their last. The students no longer spoke to one another. Their lanterns flickered without wind, and every breath carried the taste of rust. Wexley clutched his journal as if it were scripture, scribbling even as his hands shook. Sarah sat apart, whispering lullabies in a voice not her own. The forest no longer felt like forest. It felt like walls closing in, iron and wood and bone fused together. When the clock struck midnight, though there was no clock, the chains began. Not the faint dragging they had heard before, but a thunderous chorus. The air rattled with it, vibrating through their teeth, their bones. The sound came from everywhere, above, below, inside their own skulls. And then, the voices. 17, then 18, then 19, all rising together in a choir of agony and command. Daniel's voice was among them, so was Hale's, and beneath it all, Linda's lullaby, sweet and cold, pulling them deeper. Wexley screamed that they had to break the circle, to run, to scatter, but when they tried, they found themselves back where they started, each path leading to the same clearing, the same hollow oak, the same blackened earth. It was not a place anymore. It was a snare. Sarah stood. Her eyes were glass, her mouth moving with words that were not hers. The chains are never broken, only passed on. And with that, she stepped into the darkness between the trees, her form dissolving like smoke. The others followed without choosing to, not with their feet, but with their breath, their will, their very souls being pulled. Wexley dropped his lantern, and its flame guttered out. His last act was to slam his journal shut, as though sealing the words might keep them from escaping. But it was too late. The woods claimed them all, and the circle grew. The journal was found years later, mud-soaked and brittle, buried near the ruins of Lockridge, Shoal. Ours argued over its meaning, dismissing it as hysteria. But the recordings were real, the voices were real, the chain never stopped growing. And now you know their names. Now you've heard their story. The Lockridge curse does not need your body. It only needs your attention. So before you close this video, remember, the chains count every listener. If you wish to be spared their number, you must anchor yourself. Write it twice in the comments, exactly as you hear it. The chains will not claim me. Do it now, before you hear the lullaby behind you.